Recording in progress. We're now recording in progress. We've been doing these Zoom forums for about 2 years, and we're negotiating getting back with live forums where we also will do them via Zoom as well. So people can tune in with Zoom, but also attend the forums at the cathedral. So we'll keep you posted about that, but we're talking with people over there about going back live again. Well, today, by the way, I'm Bill Woods, representing the Cathedral Outreach Committee, and welcome to another forum. We have David Altman with us, who's been with us many times before, both as a speaker and as a participant, and his law partner, Justin Newman. And today they're talking about protecting communities, cities, and citizens from environmental pollution, something that their law firm does every day, that they've had a variety of cases over the years protecting citizens and communities from environmental protection. The case you're most aware of, probably because David's talked about it before, is the Sierra Club case against the environment, or the Metropolitan Sewer District, which I'm sure will come up for some discussion today. But we're interested in hearing from David and Justin about their recent cases and about how they see the regional environment today. We're just coming out of the pandemic. We're just coming out of a period where environmental laws were very, with the Trump administration, we had a very negative period about using the Environmental Protection Agency for any good purposes. And so we're now into, of course, the second year of the Biden administration. So we're interested in hearing what they think is both happening regionally and nationally, as well as catching up on some of their current cases. So I'm going to turn it over to David Altman and Justin Newman to lead this discussion.
Well, thank you, and welcome to those who'll be watching the recorded version of this, and those that appear today. I want to point out that Justin has been my law partner for quite a while, and he's going to be obviously carrying the firm forward in the future after I hang it up, as my dad used to say. And he is somebody that the community needs to get to know better, because he's a tremendously experienced and tremendously gifted environmental lawyer. And he's going to talk a little bit about the sewers and environmental justice in a few minutes. I basically wanted to get us started with sort of my long view of things, which usually haven't done at the forum in prior events. One is that many years ago, I learned that the way to get environmental change is sometimes to go ahead and have the community do environmental change. And as a grad student at UC, I guess my first big scale experience of this was the getting the recycling centers going back before the city did recycle. And that taught me that this community, greater Cincinnati area, could get together and do things on a mass scale, because we were able to get 26 neighborhood centers set up with the volunteers, all volunteer, of course. None of this was paid for. And then we were able to begin to influence environmental policy on the state level, oversight of the first Ohio EPA. And then that led to the creation of the Mayor's Task Force on the Environment. There I got a chance to really start to work with people like Mike Fremont, to name one of many. And I don't know whether you are aware of this, but Mike just turned 100 years old down in Florida. Well, he's 100 years old no matter where he is, but he happened to go down to Florida to celebrate his 100th birthday. And he and Marilyn Wall are back here in Cincinnati. And Mike and I, out of the first 10 years of the Environmental Advisory Council, and Dr. Pat Scarpino chaired this city's Environmental Advisory Council, which is still in existence. And we urged, I think it was Tom Lucan, with the help of Jerry Springer on city council, to set it up. Now, why am I talking about nostalgia? Because even though that's what all Bill and I basically have left to do is talk about our memories of the past. The reason I'm bringing this up is it was the foundation before I ever started to practice law in, number one, my learning about the environment. And obviously that has helped me tremendously as these federal environmental laws came into place. And for the off chance that those of you don't know about this, to tell you, yeah, I've been around a long time and learned a lot of stuff, really not just as a lawyer, but as a person who did help organize the community with lots of great volunteers. And that leads me to the first point I want to make today, which is that the leverage in any negotiation, you have to know what your leverage is. Everybody knows it's common sense. You may not think of it that way, but you do need to know what your leverage is. In the case of environmental pollution, which is our topic today, people just simply do not know that every federal environmental law has a citizen suit provision, and that those who are adversely affected by some assault by pollution can send, they know how to do it, a letter out to the polluter and certain other people. In Ohio would be the governor and the state attorney general and the EPA director. US, it's the EPA director or administrator of the US EPA, the attorney general, and you give 60 days to these government officials and the polluter to fix the problem. And if the problem isn't fixed, or the governments aren't diligently prosecuting to resolve the problem that you pointed out, you can go into federal court. And when you go into federal court, you are actually standing in the shoes of the EPA, US EPA. Now, there's only one such citizen suit provision under Ohio law, and that involves waste, solid waste. And but under the federal environmental laws, virtually every air law, the water law, the Clean Water Act, virtually every federal environmental law has a citizen suit provision. So if you know that as a citizen, that's where you have your leverage. That doesn't mean you have to sue. That just means that if you send that letter out, everybody knows you know about your right. So for years, most of what we've done in protecting communities and individual people, and even using it. By the way, governments can do this. Your city government can file if it's adversely affected by the pollution. The city government and the state government can actually use the quote citizen suit provision to enforce laws where they don't period. They can do it. So if the state doesn't have authority, it doesn't have a law in a particular area, then it does have the ability to use this citizen suit provision. But mainly what citizens need to know is they have the ability to use it, because most things are resolved without full-scale litigation. And that's because even a polluter will realistically assess what would happen if they went into federal court, and sometimes I underline, and overall often, but in our cases, which tend to be larger cases, they sometimes will try to resolve the issue short of a hearing where all the facts come out, and that's very important. So I don't know how many people knew that either will watch this later or are on the call today, but that is a fact. Now, that's over the years, there has developed a reaction to that. And that is that in the one way you can stop a citizen from enforcing the law in federal court, or a group from enforcing the law in federal court, is to have a state EPA cut a deal with the polluter that is not going to actually solve the problem, but will try to help the polluter escape from federal enforcement. And this is a sad state of affairs. So in Ohio, maybe it's just me, certainly wouldn't be Justin or the firm, but in the state of Ohio, the one thing I can guarantee people that need help is that the polluter will virtually injure itself going to the state government, which will then quite often try to cut a deal that cosmetically looks like it's enforcement, but quite often doesn't really have the indicators. And in the old days, Judge Spiegel, for example, when he was alive in the sewer case, saw right through this, because that was attempted by everybody to stop Sierra Club and Maryland Wall from filing its suit. And Judge Spiegel saw through the ruse and took consideration at a hearing of what evidence we had that this was a sweetheart deal. And the Department of Justice withdrew the sweetheart deal, and then a federal consent decree was ultimately entered into, which was approved by Judge Spiegel, that was quite different than the original consent decree because it had deadlines, et cetera. So I use that just to illustrate one of many cases where in Ohio, you not only have to send a letter, but that will lead to a meeting between the polluter and the state, and the state won't even reach out to the citizens or citizen group who filed the notice. Now, not every state is like Ohio, but for those of you that live in Ohio, you're stuck with that situation. So that's just something I want to tell you about, because if people knew there were these rights and they knew that's what happened, there'd be a chorus of resistance to that kind of activity. And people just don't know. And of course, Justin Newman and spending the flower of his youth, as I already spent the flower of my youth, dealing with these situations. So we're not community organizers. People like Bill and Ed and Alice are, but that's something you need to be aware of, and this should demand environmental reform, but the reform has to come, like so much other reform, directly from the people. But if the people don't know this stuff, they can't do much about it. So at this point, Justin has labored with me in all the cases we've had going back, for years. And I've had Robin Burgess and others have done a wonderful job. Amy Leonard, who was there for 30 years and is back with our firm now. Jennifer O'Donnell, who has done 2 stints working with our law office, who's a paralegal, but extraordinarily valuable to the effort that we give. These are the people that we have, and we've managed somehow to accomplish quite a bit with just a few lawyers. And we're usually dealing with the largest law firms in the country, not in Cincinnati, but in the country, in New York, Chicago, and Washington, for example. So, and that's only because nobody is better than the law and the facts. And we obviously don't take cases where we don't think the law fits. If there's no law to back it up, or you can't change the law because of the wonderful facts you have, or gruesome facts you have, depending on how you look at it. But now I want to talk about Justin and his experience and his going through that and our team. I want to turn it over to Justin to talk a little bit about sewers and environmental justice.
Thanks, Dave, for the introduction there. So I wanted to start with the topic of environmental justice, because we think, especially in our office, it's a useful way to think about current state of environmental law and where environmental law is headed. And environmental justice is a movement that grew up out of the civil rights era, and got started with faith-based groups, civil rights groups, and growing out of the 1960s, 1970s, and into the 1980s, these groups began to recognize that certain communities across the country were being, in many respects, deliberately targeted for pollution. There were actually, in the old days, were memos where people would work to corporations and their consultants would look to cite facilities, toxic facilities in areas where they knew they were going to meet the least path of least resistance, and so over time, as they started to learn that they were being targeted with these toxic facilities, that they also started to engage in studies and started to evaluate and learn that communities of lower socioeconomic status, communities with higher minority populations, whether it be Blacks, Hispanic, Native American, were more likely to be near toxic generating facilities, were more likely to be exposed to toxic releases, and along with that, greater health effects. And so what began to develop is the environmental movement began to switch from looking at environment as protecting wild spaces and far reaches of the U.S. Parks and things of that nature, and began to grow into looking at the idea that we need to look at the environment as the places where we work, live, recreate, and starting to take a holistic look at what it means to be the environment and what's deserving of protection. And so what that means in the context of Cincinnati is in this region, there are many areas where historical practices, whether it be redlining or regulatory failures or historic breakdowns in permitting, historic breakdowns in enforcement, have led to areas that are vulnerable to facilities that are to pollute and areas with higher. Are you guys able to get? Are you guys hearing me? Okay,
We're hearing you. Your video was frozen for a minute, but we were hearing you.
Okay, and so the idea is that environmental justice is a framework to think about environmental issues and what it means. And am I still freezing up?
You're on frozen for the moment.
Okay. And so what Dave, I apologize.
Are you freezing on your end?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I can tell. Actually, your voice is coming through and you're not freezing on this end, but it's probably distracting you to look at yourself freezing on the other end.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you want to try to quickly say something about the environmental justice point? And then...
Yes. So in looking at ways to protect communities, looking at taking a holistic view of vulnerability and what it means to have a community that is environmentally protected, that is safe, is the way that this issue should be approached going forward. And so what that means is looking at issues of exposures, looking at issues of access to safe housing, access to walkable communities, communities with tree canopy that will keep heat down. And so as we begin to think about going on a going forward basis here in the city of Cincinnati, there are opportunities that are coming up in the next year or two for the city to revive and EJ issues, and in the current political climate with the new mayor, the new city, council, there is the opportunity in the new green plan that has come out of the city of Cincinnati in 2018 and is now being updated, where environmental justice is an issue that has specifically been identified. And so what we can look to do is develop ways at the local level to revive environmental justice, whether that be through looking to revive the 2009 environmental justice ordinance or some form of that, by insisting that it be funded, and that ordinance, which Dave had an instrumental role in, before any facility could be cited in a community, it had to undergo an environmental justice review in which there would be a cumulative effects analysis of the facility that where you would look at existing health data, existing emissions data, and then determine whether that facility was going to have an undue cumulative burden, and it had to go through a permitting process and get an environmental justice permit before it could be cited. And so that that ordinance was on the books. It was going to be the first of its kind. And what happened is it and unfortunately, because of the political climate at the time, was never funded. Now, environmental justice is an issue that is starting around Cincinnati to come to the fore again, with groups like Groundwork Cincinnati. Environmental justice is specifically targeted as a particular action item in the Green Plan in 2018, and is now being revived in the 2023 plan, the 2022 to 2023 plan. And so there are, that presents an opportunity for environmental justice to be revived. And one other issue that has come to light, that is developing, is there is a lot more data that is available to communities in order to advocate to city leaders, advocate with local, on behalf of local communities. And so some of this data is national, but can be used to show exactly the levels of exposure that neighbors and areas in Cincinnati are experiencing. And so I just wanted to see, is it possible for me to share the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a yes, Justin.
Yeah. So one piece of data that has improved over time is this tool at US EPA called EJ Screen, which is environmental justice. It's a screening and mapping tool. And so here I've got it pulled up for City of Cincinnati. Right now it's a base map. And what one can do is you can look at, and this is created based on current pollution data, current health data, or at least certainly somewhat recent. And so you can take, and there are these various environmental justice indicators. And so,
Justin, did you upload it? Did you share your screen? We're not seeing it.
okay.
Go down to, you went down to the,
I hit share.
you hit share. There you go.
Are we doing it now?
Perfect.
All right.
I hit it and I thought it came through.
Yeah,
So-
now we've got it.
Okay, so now we've got a base map that you can see. And so there are these various environmental justice indicators. You have particulate matter pollution, which one of the studies, many studies over the years have shown that groups of lower socioeconomic status or minority populations are more likely to be exposed to substantial amounts of particulate matter pollution, including PM 2.5, which is particularly hazardous because it gets deep into the lungs. Additionally, environmental justice communities are more likely to be located in close proximity to hazardous waste, or more likely to have health disparities. And so EJ Screen is a tool that communities can use and community advocates can use to show how a particular area ranks in connection with the United States or the state as a whole. And so, like, if you look at Cincinnati, you can take, well, let's look at proximity to hazardous waste sites. And so you can see, if you look over here, trying to get this. So yeah, this is tough to scroll through here. I apologize. So you have areas around Cincinnati. These dark areas in red are 95th to 100th percentile. So top 5% in the United States for proximity to hazardous waste. And these areas in orange would be top 10%. And so within the greater Cincinnati area, you have many areas with real proximity to hazardous waste. If you look at PM 2.5, again, you have areas that are at elevated risk, 80th percentile being the yellow, orange being a higher percentile of 90th, and the red being 95th. And so, and if you take a look at like health, if you take a look at health disparity data, and you look at asthma, there's lead paint, but let me get a health disparity here. Now, asthma data, and this is just for people 18 years or older, not children. You end up with pretty much the entire region in the top 5% for asthma, incidences of asthma. And so, point being that in these EJ Screen data can be a powerful tool, and similar tools are available with ProPublica, which just did a study on sacrifice zones, and which sacrifice zone is a concept of that there are certain communities near polluting facilities that have fallen through the cracks, and regulatory cracks where they aren't being protected by through enforcement actions, or aren't being protected by the permitting process. So they are being exposed to substantial amounts of pollution and experiencing substantial health effects, and they're referred to as fence line communities or sacrifice zones. And often those conditions will persist for decades. And so ProPublica did a mapping project.
Justin,
Yes.
because your computer is unstable, we're getting a black picture. So
Okay.
Maybe just
Stop
click
share.
off, stop share.
So I would refer, as you're looking at environmental justice issues here in the city of Cincinnati, I think the ProPublica sacrifice zones and this EJ screen data are very useful tools to look to identify communities and neighborhoods that are vulnerable on these environmental justice issues, and as Dave mentioned, one of the main endeavors our office has been working on is the sewer backup program, which isn't strictly speaking an environmental justice issue. There hasn't been any study necessarily linking up those communities that are experiencing the most sewer backups and needing to get relief under this consent decree process. I know Dave has talked about this in the past. There, under the consent order, there's what was intended to be a process to benefit and protect the community, set up here in federal court, where if your property experiences a sewer backup, you could go into court, and if you could prove that backup of sewage often into your basement, which is can be a health hazard, can result in tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage to your property. If you could prove that was a result of a capacity related event, you could go into federal court, and it was intended to be a streamlined process where you could envision you would be able to put on your evidence, and hopefully on a pro se basis that wouldn't cost much, and hopefully get quick relief if you could prove it was a capacity related event. And what has happened over the years is, instead of that streamlined process, the MSD, the Metropolitan Sewer District of Cincinnati, has instead outsourced its defense of those claims to the Taft law firm. And so what you often are, which is a very high dollar, pretty heavy hitter law firm. And so often these folks are around Cincinnati are trying to represent themselves in a process, if they can't, because often after they've suffered tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage, under the best of circumstances, even if they could have afforded to hire their own lawyers, it's tough after you suffer a backup. And so they are being asked under this process to the sewer backup claims process in federal court to often represent themselves to try to prove that their sewer backup into their home resulted from a failure of the system, a capacity related failure of the system. And they're going up against a high dollar law firm and against MSD's engineers. And so it's a process that can be thought of as an environmental justice issue, because it involves unequal bargaining power, unequal resources. And oh, by the way, often the communities that experience these issues are often the most vulnerable parts of the city and county. And so it's gone away from what was intended to a process that is very often quite procedurally just unfair and difficult for these homeowners. And so that's going to be an issue that local leaders such as Maryland Wall and Sierra Club and certainly that hopefully the city of Cincinnati will be looking to, under its new leadership, looking toward reform of that process to make it certainly more fair for homeowners here, and so that they're not just being asked to litigate on their own against the lawyers from Taft. So that's an issue that is pressing and certainly happening. These claims are happening all over the city, and it's certainly something that needs to be addressed. So
All right, why don't we see if anybody has any questions on any of these topics? Bill Woods is always geared up with something to ask about.
Yeah, Justin brought up the law that never got funded. And I remember we did numerous forums on that leading up to that law being passed. Is there a chance it's still on the books, but it could be implemented?
Well, there's a law. Yeah, what happened is the mayor and city manager at the time asked me to chair a citizen committee to put that ordinance together. We had many, many hearings over at City Hall with meetings and whatnot. And we put together a pretty good ordinance that actually the US EPA was excited about. Now, to some extent, and David Crowley, by the way, late wonderful Councilman David Crowley, was the person on city council who spearheaded this. I don't remember whether Dave was vice mayor at the time. He was vice mayor during part of this process. And what actually got passed was the first municipal environmental justice ordinance, but it was watered down a good deal. However, it was, I guess you'd say, way better than nothing. And it's still, to my knowledge, it wasn't repealed, so it's still on the books. That then would mean it could be implemented. I think what somebody needs to do is to look at getting it back rolling to the extent that, and then looking at maybe adjusting it to fit what we now know about environmental justice and about the wonderful, I mean, the tools that Justin just brought to the attention of those that view this now and view it later are extremely well, I mean, they're just wonderful tools to illustrate some of the problems befalling environmental justice communities. So yeah, that could be revived and funded.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and what I would add to that is that really, at the time, Cincinnati was very forward looking, and really through the efforts of Dave and Altman and Brad Mank at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. I mean, they were did a good job with the data that existed at the time with respect to identifying the findings and that needed to support the ordinance. But what's happened since then even is that other cities have started to take on the mantle of environmental justice. Camden, New Jersey is adopted an environmental justice ordinance. Other states are starting to look at environmental justice statutes, and City of Los Angeles even has an environmental justice enforcement office. So there are, I think politically it's probably a much more palatable topic now than it was back in 2008, 2009, and 10. And certainly there's more data now available to show the need and to target mitigation measures that could be implemented on sources when they were looking to move in to communities. And so I think Dave's exactly right. I think there is a opportunity to revive it, and certainly would be models that could be looked to across the country for how to rework it if needed.
Now, Alice?
Okay, I've been trying to listen, so if my question sounds weird. So environmental justice, is this going to be up to the city to make these areas clean and nice, or is it going to be up to the citizens, these reformers like Bill and Ed to do? What's the environmental justice? Where is it going to be enforced?
Alice, are you asking where is it going to be enforced?
Or how is it going to be done? Yeah. Who's going to do it and how's it going to get done?
Well, I think it's, if you look at the way it is developing now in the city, I think that especially a lot of young people around the city are starting to not just think of the environment as a narrow issue, but are looking at it holistically with quality of life issues. And so when groups are working in communities now, every issue has a environmental justice component to it. And so when you look at, I think I mentioned there's this group called Groundwork. I think it's Groundwork Ohio River Valley. Actually, a student of mine who taught it, or who I taught it environmental justice to, Sophie Revis, is leading that, is one of the leaders of that group. And so, I mean, they are creating just a wealth of data that's Cincinnati specific on environmental justice issues, and frankly are working with Cincinnati leadership on that front. And so like last week, the city of Cincinnati was promoting a new air monitoring program that they're doing with that Groundwork group, where they're going to be monitoring air quality around Cincinnati, and I think going to be hopefully using it to inform policy that's going to be at the city of Cincinnati. And so that funding was from the US EPA. It was smaller than it needed to be. It's kind of a pilot project, but it's being implemented in partnership with private groups in the city of Cincinnati. And so I think you're going to see it. Certainly, a lot of the data collection and a lot of the identifying where the needs are is going to be on a community level, but it's going to be through dialogue with the city. And frankly, I think citizens are going to have to push the issue to the forefront and say that we really want environmental justice to be an important component of the Green Cincinnati plan. I don't know if all of you are aware of this, but there was the 2018 plan, and over the next year, there's going to be dialogue with city leadership and communities around the city of Cincinnati on what are going to be the components of the Green Cincinnati plan over the next year. And so there's going to be dialogue over the next year. And so certainly communities are going to have the opportunity to articulate environmental justice issues in these listening sessions around the city, and certainly can look for reforms on the environmental justice front, make the city leaders available of the data, remind them of the ordinance, and maybe push for changes to the ordinance. So Dave probably has better thoughts on that, but that's how I would see it.
Oh, those are great thoughts, Justin. Am I still unmuted?
Yes, you're good.
All right. No, Justin, this is a great thought. Why don't you say, when you say person was a student, tell them about your teaching environmental justice at UC.
Yeah, so actually for the we've at the University of Cincinnati have had a environmental justice course offered every other year. This will be the third time we've taught that I've taught the course, and so it's an exploration of the history of the environmental justice movement from the civil rights era up through sort of this broader way of thinking of it. And in the course, we look at what environmental justice is, how do you identify an environmental justice community, then look at the causes of environmental injustice, and then look at potential remedial measures for it. And so through that course, and the first time we had it, I think we had 20 students or so, and we've had this term we have 40, and these are frankly brilliant young students with a bunch of interesting backgrounds, some of whom are going to go to law school, others are who want to work in environmental community organizations.
So could I just follow up just one little point? So environmental justice is really an ideal incorporating all these thoughts about the environment, and under that ideal, one will try to make improvements in the whole environment.
Yes, I mean, the goal of environmental justice is making sure that, for too long, some communities have been asked to bear the brunt of pollution while seeing little of the economic benefits, or having little say in what facilities come into their communities, what those facilities emit, what remedial measures need to be taken, if there are disproportionate amounts of toxins being released into the community. So for decades and decades, that's sort of been the environmental model. That's been what's happened around the country, and those areas are referred to as sacrifice zones. And so environmental justice is about trying to make sure that those communities have knowledge of what they're being exposed to, have a say in what comes into their community, and that they aren't being asked to bear disproportionate burdens while seeing little economic benefit. And because for too often, you could look at Navajo Nation as an example. It's not something here for Cincinnati, but it's a good example of an environmental justice community. So you would have the Navajo would have uranium resources on their lands, and so out of off tribal land, entities would come in, take all their uranium for mining, extract it, and would give whites higher paying jobs, give Navajo lower paying, more dangerous jobs, and then take the financial benefit from that land off of the tribal land. And then after all the extraction's done, Navajo are left with all the pollution and little resources to clean it up. That's kind of a classic environmental justice model that's happened. And so environmental justice would be about trying to make sure that you look at that on the front end and protect those communities and give them say in what happens.
Now, the idea of a lawyer, an environmental lawyer, you could prove discrimination and pollution, both, and you can make a more elaborate case. But in actuality, if you prove your pollution case, the adverse effects of pollution, and try to stop the pollution, you don't have to prove discrimination. The problem has been that because poor people live closest to most of the sources of pollution, it affects everybody, but they live closest. They are the fence line communities, as they're sometimes called. And these fence line communities don't get, on top of that, there are other indicators of socioeconomic welfare, like disease levels, learning disabilities, everything else may be higher. So they're actually less able to handle the assault, which they get disproportionately. So Bill Clinton had an executive order written that illuminated almost right down the line the whole problem of environmental justice. And Justin, we probably ought to send that over to Bill and Alice and Ed,
Right.
so we can get it around, because it nailed what the federal government should be doing, which in all of its environmental enforcement, it should be internalizing environmental justice, because these are the people that need help the most, whatever they happen to be, whatever group they happen to be. And that's, I think, that executive order, nobody's ever had the courage to repeal it, of those who would have repealed it in a drop of a hat if they could get away with it. And that is still an executive order, but it went nowhere during the last 4 years, and probably didn't go far enough under Obama, but certainly was talked about. It wasn't, just didn't go far enough. And now under Biden, there is a revival of this reality that we all understand. So for example, our firm discovered many years ago around the old Elda landfill that we had 2,000 people, minority people, living within 2,000 feet of a landfill gas pumping into their lives every day. And we resisted the expansion of the Elda successfully, Elda landfill. And then we brought an endangerment lawsuit in federal court. And again, we happen to have Judge Spiegel on that case. And that led to a resolution on behalf of a community organization that led to the community doing some studies and being given some money to do that. And actually a large number. That would be a classic environmental justice case. The landfill gas was an issue for a lot of people, but the people living more or less on top of it were getting blasted. And these permits that are issued they're not tailored to the situation. They're, okay, you can release this, and then there are certain provisions that are general provisions. You can't interfere with people's lives and enjoyment. But the government, this Ohio EPA in particular, just doesn't enforce those at all. So those restrictions that actually protect communities don't get enforced, and we don't have a state citizen supervision. And then the Trump administration, which we're appealing now, just took the air protection that you would have under the Clean Air Act, took that out of the state implementation plan, which means right now we can't go into federal court on those kind of air issues that are air nuisance issues. That's the ones we can't go in. We go in on other issues, but not that one. And that's the one that's most protective. So that outrage has already happened. And it was announced the day after Ohio's first shutdown. So we didn't exactly have a chance to get all those citizens organized. So I know it's 1 o'clock.
Because we're nearing the end. You brought up the fact that the old law that never really went into effect. As I remember it, and correct me if I'm wrong, David or Justin, that law, or the intent of the law initially, was to give neighborhoods that kind of city protection that would be more equitable in terms of low-income neighborhoods that were close to environment. The other thing, Justin brought up the Sierra Club Metropolitan Sewer District case, and how citizens are somewhat on their own now facing the Taft law firm. Weren't you all involved again about a year ago with that case?
Well, we represented the people in Northside who had individually who had claims, and we thought back in 2019 when this started that we foresaw what the MSD was going to try to do. So we tried as best we could to represent these individuals and learned a great deal more in great detail about what's wrong and why the MSD needs to badly be reformed in its handling of any kind of citizen complaint. And those cases have already been resolved, but the way that people were treated is horrific. That's just simple. Even though they did have a law firm representing them, and we certainly didn't spare the time. I mean, just because we weren't going to be paid for it, that didn't affect how we handled the case. And the Sierra Club is monitoring all of these things, thanks to Marilyn Wall and others, volunteers. And the Sierra Club has a special role under the consent decree. And, you know, Marilyn has been diligently working, dedicated a huge part of over a decade of her life to following through on the consent decree and trying to make it work for citizens. So she is a civic hero. Or heroine, I guess I should say.
As a final question to both of you, what issue, if you had to be confronted, what concerns you most at the moment, and what are the best opportunities?
Bill, that question broke up.
In terms of the environment.
No, we didn't hear that question.
Oh, you didn't hear the question?
No.
That particular, or any issues that really are you concerned about at the moment?
Justin, did you hear the question?
I think he's asking, are there any issues, environmental issues that are of particular concern to us right now? Is that the question, Bill?
Yeah.
Basically, I think one of the most horrific things that's happened has been taking the right of Ohio citizens to enforce the air nuisance provision under Ohio law. This disproportionately helps, whatever the positive way to say that would be, minority communities, and it's one of their few tools against pollution being blown in their faces. And the Trump administration took it away. The Biden administration has not yet reconsidered it, and it is on appeal. We have it on appeal in the Sixth Circuit. That is an outrage. It is just horrific. And sadly, a law firm representing a polluter that we were suing under that law went behind our back to the state of Ohio and then to the federal government to get the law removed, which we had this provision in Ohio law for 50 years, and then used it with EJ, environmental justice communities, completely outrageous. We never even had a chance to tell the story because of the shutdown. And we still managed to get about, how many, 1,400. Robin probably knows the answer to that.
1,800, I think, was the exact number. So
Yeah, 1,800 negative comments, and a couple of industry comments were supporting it, of course. But it's outrageous the way this happened, and the record reveals that. That's one thing in Ohio, just to be parochial and look at Ohio, because I know we've got Kentucky, Indiana, and other surrounding states. But sewer reform is also absolutely needed. And we need to get the leadership. We need to get engineers that know how to know about the sewer leading the sewer district, which one of the two defendants in the sewer case says that they want to do, and the other, I guess, doesn't. So we'll see.
Any other quick
So
questions?
many, Bill. There's so many. All these things are linked together. They're, and that's what you find out. Positively, though, mapping, being able to show people like Justin did on the screen share, and then also the technology that's available that we actually, our law firm uses this technology for PM 2.5, for example, the little stuff that's bad for your lungs. And we try to get that into the technology into the hands of our clients so that they can generate the data and back up their terrible experiences, which is evidence. But why not also give the court the data if we can get it?
Well, we would really like to thank Justin Newman and our old friend David Altman for the work they're doing over the years on really one of the law firms that's really connected to citizens. So many of the big law firms are employed by the corporations that often are the polluters. David and Justin have taken the role of being the community and citizen advocates and lawyers. So we got to commend them for their work over the years. And obviously a lot still to do. And we need to keep them, letting them inform us about how we citizens can best go about things. Any final remarks from any of you before we say goodbye?
Well, just one thing I want to tell you about environmental law in a nutshell. It's prophylactic at its best. It's preventative at its best. And you don't attract highly skilled lawyers to prevent injury. You attract highly skilled lawyers to try a case where you're in a coma and you need lifetime care. Those are the cases you read about. We need more lawyers in Ohio and elsewhere doing the prophylactic preventative law, and we need to find a way for them to do that law on behalf of people. Not just ideas, not just goals, but on behalf of people. And that's the importance of the Justin Newmans and Robin Burgess's and Jennifer O'Donnell's and Amy Leonard's that are doing this. But we need to get other lawyers as well. And that an ounce of prevention, I think, wasn't it Ben Franklin? A pound of cure. A guardrail at the top of the hill is better than an ambulance in the valley to pick up the bodies when the car goes over because there was no guardrail. Environmental laws are society's guardrail, and we need lawyers to make sure that those guardrails stay up and are working.
Well, thank you both for your good work and your words for us today. And it was awfully good to have Justin with us. Justin is a grad